Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Raquel Guzman. I am the account manager with Momentum Events. It's my great pleasure to welcome you here today for our session. Before I turn things over to our presenters, just a few words of note. The session is being recorded. Everyone on the call will automatically receive an email from us containing the link to the recording that you can review or share with your colleagues after. You will get that from us during the next day or so. The presenters have agreed also to make a copy of their slides available, and in that follow-up email, you'll get details on how exactly you can access those slides. Finally, we'll be conducting a Q&A at the conclusion of our session. To pose any questions to the panelists throughout the webinar, please use the question and answer window in your Zoom control panel. With that, it is my great pleasure to introduce Anthony Pauly, Vice President of Strategic Accounts at Speedion, and Matt Whipple, Vice President of Marketing Services and Campaign Strategy at Speedion, for today's webinar entitled A Growth Marketer's Guide to Launching Direct Mail. With that, I will turn it over to you, Matt and Anthony.
Thank you, Raquel. First, everyone, thank you for attending our webinar today. My name is Anthony, and as Raquel mentioned, I am the Vice President of Strategic Accounts at Speedion. My main focus here is to work with our clients on helping them scale customer acquisition programs via data-driven solutions. I've been in the industry for just over 10 years now, and have been with Speedion for about 2. Matt?
Thanks, Anthony, and thanks, Raquel, and thank you everyone on the line for joining us. I'm Matt Whipple. I'm the Vice President of Marketing Services and Campaign Strategy here at Speedion. In that role, I help companies launch, scale, and optimize a direct mail channel, as well as find unique data solutions for cross-channel marketing needs. I joined Speedion in 2019. Prior to joining, I was at a direct-to-consumer meal kit company, overseeing all of their offline media solutions, and prior to that, worked at a big box retailer overseeing catalog, promotional postcards, and direct mail retail flyers. We'll kick it over to Anthony, walk us through the agenda briefly, and then get into the presentation.
So what we're going to cover off on today is a few different things. One, why direct mail? Why is it necessary for marketers in today's world to invest time and money into this channel? What are the benefits of direct mail? How can you marry direct mail and digital together? What should you expect when you're going to launch a direct mail program? And then why you need to think long-term for success. And we'll also go through a case study about a client of ours who successfully launched a direct mail program. I think the first thing that we want to cover off on is really why direct mail. The main thing is that it's extremely effective at engaging both new and existing customers. I think, Matt, you have a lot of insight into this in your prior roles. Did you want to give a little bit of background into why direct mail is so effective?
Yeah, there's a few unique things about the channel that really make it stand out. We'll get into this a little more detail later on, but the audience development side of direct mail is unique in the fact that when we go build a campaign audience, we're able to take a customer's client file and put it through demographic data pens to understand what are the key demographic factors that make a good customer for them, and marry that to another data set, be it a consumer file, maybe it's a co-op database where we're looking at transaction history for both our customers' clients and the prospect data pool, to then, once we complete that process, take a look at the audience and say, does this look and feel right? Here are the key factors driving audience selection, and we're allowed to be very transparent in that process. There's no black box where someone's putting their audience, their customer file in, and then it's just saying, trust me, we'll take it from here. So the transparency is very unique. Another unique thing about the channel is it's a guaranteed impression. So the act of someone going to their mailbox, bringing their mail inside, sorting through their mail at the counter, even if that mail piece is discarded, you know that you're getting an impression for your brand, your product, being able to tell at least a small part of that story to your prospective audience. Along those lines, the potential for pass along in direct mail, I think, is often overlooked, where through that audience building that I just described, even if I'm targeted, say, and it's not the right time for me to buy maybe a new piece of luggage, But I may know that you, Anthony, need a new carry-on bag, and I got an offer for 10% off pizza luggage. I'm not ready to convert, but I have the option to pass that along to you, which is something you don't get a lot in a page search or paid social, things like that. In the space that the various formats allow someone to utilize in direct mail can oftentimes tell a better product story than maybe a banner ad or a Facebook carousel, where even if it's a postcard, maybe it's a letter piece, maybe it's a trifold, and you really want to explain to someone the features and benefits of your product or service, you don't feel like you can only limit it to one feature, one service aspect. You're able to tell that complete picture, which can be very valuable.
I think to add to that as well, the digital channels, the social channels are becoming rather oversaturated in terms of the amount of advertisers that are leveraging those channels. So the opportunity to really differentiate yourself is saturated within those channels. And so as you can see from the response rates from the house list and the prospect list, specifically on this chart, they're much higher because you're getting into people's mailboxes, you're giving them something tangible, and you're giving them a way to actually interact with your brand in a way that they might not on a mobile phone, on an iPad, on their desktop, where they might just habitually just get rid of the offer because they're just not even thinking about it at the time.
I think that's a great point, and I'd like to hear your thoughts a little bit on, does direct mail pair well with digital channels and how they interact with one another?
Yeah, so I think it pairs incredibly well with other channels. For one, it's incredibly hyper-targeted. So you're able to, as you mentioned, get to that one-to-one targeted audience. You can leverage a lot of your website interactions, shopping cart abandonment, tagging and pixeling your website, and getting that information and resolving that back to an address allows you to, in near real time, understand who's hitting your website and then retarget them with a direct mail piece that can be incredibly impactful. And so if somebody went onto your website, almost purchased but didn't, you can then give them an offer via direct mail that they might just delete the email for whatever reason. So you can leverage your digital assets as well in the direct mail channel. In fact, a lot of information from the United States Postal Service shows that there's an increase in website traffic when leveraging direct mail and an increase in conversions as well. And so it just shows that the channel in and of itself is highly impactful when targeting consumers.
Yeah, and thinking about a direct mail audience starts with a name and address. You know, today it's very possible for us to resolve email address from that or vice versa. So when a prospect mail audience is kind of your step one phase in a marketing plan, the ability to upload that list into social or display and then utilize those channels as follow-up mechanisms to that campaign as a whole, I think is very valuable when, when starting with that. So.
Right, and it works across industries. It works across industries, and it is meaning business to business or business to consumer. So if there's any B2B marketers on the webinar today, increasing leads. So if you have sales teams that need leads into their sales funnel, direct mail is a very impactful way to increase leads. It's also a good way to get more content downloads as well. And so you can play with a lot of the offers, a lot of the creative and the copy to allow you to drive just more website engagement, drive more digital engagement as well. I know that we've seen in the past with some of our clients when they marry the two channels together, we can send the digital or the direct mail piece at a certain time, and we know when it gets in home, we can then start to run display ads and digital advertisements to them to help really increase response lift. And so the reason why that's important is because you're already paying for that offline data. You might as well also just try and onboard it to get people to get more brand awareness, more impressions to that individual. So the likelihood of them responding increases, in our experience, upwards to 30%, which is a very high number when you're talking about a rather expensive channel.
And the incremental marketing investment is not 30% to add a digital a digital campaign or a social campaign and the impressions associated with that to the already sunk cost of the direct mail program, right?
Right, and then when we think about audiences too, we've been talking a lot about digital. One of the important generations that marketers are trying to go after now are millennials. And I think there's this aura around millennials that says they don't interact with direct mail. Matt, what is your thoughts on that?
That's a myth. So there's now some really good information out there. The USPS put some statistics together around this. One of our print partners has done an in-depth study on this as well. And we know that 59% of millennials find information they receive by mail to be more useful than information they receive by email. And I think the key factor there is someone has gone through the process of putting together a well thought out creative plan, putting together a highly targeted audience, sending that physical piece to their prospects to interact with, feel, touch, consider. And the information that comes along with that is more useful than, hey, did you hear about this sale we have going on? We know that 65% of millennials pay attention to direct mail advertising. I've had a lot of conversations with folks, millennial marketers that will say to me, well, I haven't checked my mail in 4 weeks, so why would I invest in direct mail? And it's important to remember that you as a marketer, as a person, may not necessarily reflect an entire generation and how they interact with marketing messaging. So 65%, like I said, pay attention to direct mail. And then the most interesting piece of this, I think, is almost 90% of millennials take time to look through their mail daily or weekly. So they're spending meaningful time engaging with your brand, listening to the key facts about your brand or your product or your service that you want them to see, and it's a conscious effort on their side.
So now that we've kind of set the stage as to why you need direct mail, now we get to the what, and really that's what to expect as a marketer when launching a direct mail program or campaign. And there's quite a few different things to take into consideration, and Matt, having done this at a variety of different brands, would love to get your insight into not only the costs associated with direct mail, but really the important parts of a direct mail program.
Yeah, so I guess if we start to think about, what type of time investment is launching a program, what is the lead time you need? The things that go into answering that question it kind of depends, right? If this is the first time you're launching a direct mail campaign and you're starting from scratch on your audience, you're starting from scratch on your creative, that's going to be a very different timetable than, hey, we've got a model built, we've got creative we've already built once, we're going to refreshen it for seasonality, so forth. So let's say someone's starting from scratch, you want to account for about 30 days in audience development, and that means if you're not using your own customer CRM file, you're going to go out, have someone build a modeled universe for you. You need to account for time of sharing your data, having your partner digest your data, pass back key findings to you about your customers, and then building out what that prospect audience looks like and the key demographic or maybe transactional drivers about that audience. So everyone should be on the same page, well informed about what's going into their audience. Either in parallel to that or after that process, you need to start a creative process too, which can take up to 30 days as well, maybe even longer. In the catalog world, 45 to 60 days, depending on the number of pages. So you need to decide on a format, have a printer die lines built, have your creative team or a third-party creative team actually build the first iteration. Then you have the back and forth. You have final proofing done at your printer, and then a final press date where your production goes live. That process itself is 30 days, up to. And then once all that's done and you feel like you got to the end, you have to remember it's going to take the post office another 10 to 15 days to deliver your pieces. So all in all, we feel really good when we have 90 days to start a program from scratch. Can it be done quicker? Yes. To do it quicker, it certainly is going to take some alignment on both sides, that resources are going to be available and dedicated when needed.
Yeah, I would say, just to add to that too, from a not only from a cost perspective, but a time perspective, it's very important to get organizational buy-in to this type of channel because it does take a lot of investment up front for things that are going to take a little bit of time to get real results from. And so you do need to get that buy-in and that trust from executive leadership or any other important stakeholders within the organization to say, we want to invest this much money in this channel to make sure it's a viable channel for us to grow our company. And so it's really important to get that buy-in.
Yeah, and kind of sticking to the cost side, you know, there are variable costs associated with the direct mail program. There's really 4 cost centers to consider. One is your print production. Another is your postage. A third is the data, and then you have any campaign management or data processing CPMs that get baked into that as well. So just touch on these briefly. Print production can be anywhere from, I'm going to produce a postcard or I'm going to produce a 120-page catalog, right? So there's definitely a lot of variability in how much of this overall is dedicated to the print production side. The postage side tends to be a little more predictable, where depending on your total postage quantity, you know, you could run anywhere from 22 cents up to 27 cents a piece. We generally like, as a rule of thumb, to say anticipate postage being 40 to 60% of your total campaign investment. Anything outside of that should really be a special case scenario. Maybe it's a very high-end piece, or on the other side of the spectrum, a low end. I'm looking for cheap, quick, dirty, get it in the mail, variability. The data side, right? If you're mailing your CRM file, those are names and addresses you have permission to mail. There's no incremental cost associated there. If you're partnering with someone to provide prospect audiences, that's another cost center you need to consider. And then, you know, if folks are helping you with your campaign management and running data processing, which means verifying address changes, removing any duplication, applying key codes or any promo codes to your data so that it's ready to be passed along to the printer and produced. You know, all that said, you can anticipate anywhere between $350 a thousand and $600 a thousand.
Okay. And then I know, Matt, especially in our experience with being on the services side, there's a lot of efficiencies that can be built into direct mail programs, especially kind of after that first test pilot, right? So the first one, it's really important just to focus on getting the creative, getting the audience, and getting the direct mail in market. But obviously, as the program matures, there's a lot of things that marketers can start to do, either working with a service provider if they have some external agency doing that, or if they do it internally, where they can kind of, you know, we like to say pull levers, so to speak, to get more efficiencies within the program. Can you touch on that a little bit?
I mean, efficiency can come from a lot of places here. It could be as simple as, hey, I'm running postcards, and if I shave a half an inch off my width, I can run 3 wide on a roll of paper rather than 2 wide, or 4 wide rather than 3 wide. So, which in turn reduces paper waste, which in turn increases efficiency. You can also get more efficient with postage, where maybe you utilize a commingled pool, and had you mailed alone, you're going to run 26 cents a piece in postage, but because you combine with other brands with like-sized mail pieces, the post office is willing to offer discounts at those sortation levels down to 22 cents. So it's important, like you said, initial run, let's be efficient, but let's not try to over-engineer. And that first test is really about, is this a viable channel? Do I have the test set up right? And then, you know, we'll work to drive down efficiencies and costs down the road.
And the other thing to consider, really the most important part of the campaign, there's 3 things that we like to focus in on. It's the audience, the offer, and the creative. And this is in order of importance. If you don't have the right audience, it's not going to matter how good of an offer you have or how good the creative is. If you're trying to sell lawnmowers to someone that owns a condo, they're not gonna respond. And so it's really, really important that the audience is as targeted as possible. It's going to be an audience that responds well to the offer and to the creative. especially since it's something tangible. It gives the audience something to interact with. So you want to make sure that it's going to the right person.
Yeah, and a little color on that. Because the final produced piece ends up being, of these three, the only aspect you really get to see, touch, feel. A lot of folks will want to spend a majority of their time talking about paperweight, talking about red versus blue versus yellow. And while those things are important, my experience has been the time spent there is way overinvested compared to the time spent analyzing the audience that we're mailing to. So, okay, I've relied on a third party to help me build out a prospect pool. Tell me about that pool. What are their ages? Are they married? Do they live in single family homes? Do they live in multifamily dwelling units? And whatever those facts are, why did we come up to those answers? And make sure that not only you as the marketer, but your data provider, everyone's on the same page with who that audience is. To your point, it's my favorite analogy there. Don't try to sell lawnmowers to condo owners because it just won't work.
Well, I stole it from you. So the other thing to take into consideration is a lot of clients that we work with, they don't have third-party data. So they can model their internal data really well, and there are some things that you can do from that perspective, but you guys are growth marketers. You guys need to scale your business, and the way to do that is to acquire new customers. And so there are third-party data vendors and data and analytics providers that are able to take insights from your customer database and look into general consumer prospecting databases to help you guys further acquire new customers, further grow your brand with prospects that are going to interact with your company. And so that's why it's really, really important to get that audience right.
And just one piece on offer quickly. We say offer, a lot of times folks will think we're talking about $1 off, free shipping, % off. The offer can be the product or service you're offering as well, if it's unique enough and there's enough value add to your prospects that they'll want to transact with you. You know, generally speaking, though, they'll expect some type of discount, especially for a first-time customer there.
Sure. So the important thing is long-term, thinking long-term for success. How do you measure the success of a campaign? How does the attribution differ in direct mail? And what's a good CPA for a direct mail program? So going back to how do you measure success, there's multiple ways that you can do that. The industry standard is a matchback analysis. We already know who we're mailing. So when that campaign runs its course, we're able then to say, we mailed these groups of people, and these people are now sitting in our customer database. So you can give a one-to-one match. Additionally, things like direct-to-site traffic, you can see how much site traffic you've increased after the campaign has gone in market. You can tie it to brand search traffic. So if there's specific keywords within the direct mail offer or the direct mail creative, you're able to measure then search traffic, and your digital teams can use a lot of these different insights to help further improve their online channels as well. And then also from a redemption side, promo codes, telephone numbers, anything like that you can put on the direct mail creative to further enhance the opportunity to capture responders is really important.
Yeah, and I want to spend a little time on this because it is so important that you're measuring direct mail appropriately. And a lot of times, if you're a digitally native brand and this is your first kind of wade into the water in direct mail, you are likely coming from a performance marketing perspective that is focused and built just to measure the efficiency of your digital channels. That means you're looking at website source drivers, you're looking at specific UTMs, maybe unique URLs that your affiliates are pushing and so forth. Now you throw in direct mail, which maybe you're doing some Hulu TV type campaigns where you understand that you can't measure that in the same traditional way, but you throw direct mail on top of this, and now let's say you receive a piece, Anthony, and it's for Matt's belts. I say, Anthony, here's 10% off Matt's belts. You're likely going to do one of two things. If the piece did a good job at capturing your attention, you're going to go look for more information or go look to transact. and you'll likely go to mattsbelts.com, or you will Google Matt's Belts. Now, say you Google and ad comes up for 10% off, right? So you have the same offer as I just sent you in direct mail with a 10-digit promo code of different letters and numbers, or you can just click on this link. So in a traditional digital attribution model, it's going to look like paid search. So the matchback process allows you to further identify what's driving things like search and direct to site traffic. You likely don't just roll out of bed that morning and say, hey, I'm going to Google Matt's Belts because it sounds like a fun product. So
I think that's an important thing to think about too, is because especially in year 2020 now, there's so many marketers and so many brands rely on single channel attribution. And when we have the ability to take this offline data, marry it to online data, and start to understand how many pieces of media does a consumer really need, or how many impressions do I need, regardless of what channels they're in, using that direct mail piece as kind of the main driver, we can start to play with, okay, so we need to do at least 4 digital impressions, 2 emails, and a direct mail piece or 2 in order to convert that customer. So that really gives you a lot more insight into budget planning, into forecasting, into really just the overall effectiveness of a campaign. And so it's really important to start thinking about how can you further use direct mail to increase the other channels' effectiveness as well. And obviously with direct mail, it is a longer process. It could take anywhere between 30 and 90 days to start to understand how it's performing. And that's another thing to really take into consideration. As Matt mentioned earlier, it's not nearly as fast as Facebook or digital, where you can turn on a campaign and within 24 hours, turn it off or ramp it up. You really need to invest a lot of time and energy into this campaign or into this channel to make it work.
Yep. Yeah, and you couple this 30, 60, 90-day attribution window with the 60, 90-day planning process that we touched on earlier. All of a sudden you're at 4 months, right? 3-4 months to understand if the channel is viable, how can I scale it, and is the juice worth the squeeze here? So it's a long time for folks who are used to, hey, I'll just send another email next week and change something up. It's a completely different approach there.
Right. And so, Matt, in your opinion, as a marketer is starting to plan for direct mail, knowing that it's going to take them 6 months, sometimes, up to 6 months sometimes, to even start to see results after they do the planning, do the creative, get everything launched and ready to go. That's not fair. Maybe it's not 6 months. Maybe it's a shorter time period. But Four. What should we look at from a success perspective? What does success in a campaign really look like?
So that's something that when we work with someone, we try to identify up front. So, okay, what does success look like to you? Is it a $200 cost per acquisition? Is it, I want X number of, to your point, if you're a B2B play, I want X number of content downloads or registrations on my site. So what does success look like? When we're talking about growth marketers, most of the time, success is meeting a cost per acquisition or exceeding a cost per acquisition goal. So definitely a top 5 question I'll get is, what CPA should I expect with direct mail? And if you haven't run a program before or haven't done a test, there's not a great answer to that. So we go about answering that a different way. What we'll do is say, okay, what is your cost per acquisition goal? Let's assume it's $100. And then say, okay, you have a $100 cost per acquisition goal. What is your potential test investment here? Let's call it $100,000. So now we have a $100 cost per acquisition. We have a $100,000 investment. That tells us we need 1,000 conversions to reach our cost per acquisition goal. Now we look at, with a $100,000 budget, how many pieces of mail can I send? Assuming a mail piece costs 50 cents, we know we can send 200,000 pieces. So now we've gotten to a point where we can send 200,000 pieces. We need 1,000 conversions. That tells us we need a 0.5% response rate. And at that point, we'll take a step back with our customer and say, either this feels attainable or it doesn't. And that can be based on things we've seen with other clients, basic industry knowledge. I know we saw 5% acquisition mail up front. For new campaigns, we like that number to be 1.5% or less. That feels like it's within striking distance of achievable. So based on whatever efficiencies or tweaks we need to make upfront, making sure that we're setting the program up for success when it comes to cost per acquisition is very important.
And so I've ran my campaign. The campaign's been in market. We do the matchback analysis, and it falls short of that CPA goal or that agreed upon KPI, if you will.
Yep.
What do you recommend from a moving forward perspective? Do you one and done, or are there things that we can think about as marketers that we should be doing?
So a couple ways to think about that. Hopefully, your initial test was set up in a way that we tested multiple data sources. Maybe Speedion doesn't have the right data for this. Maybe it's a co-op data, transactional play, or maybe it's hey, we really need to be retargeting site visitors, or whatever that mix is, and we're testing multiple sources up front to understand where the sweet spot may be. In addition to that, we want to make sure that the creative variations give us a potential for success as well, where a postcard, maybe we'll test a postcard and we'll also test a letter pack, or a postcard, a letter pack, and a trifold. So at the end, when we say the campaign doesn't work, there's a better chance that one or two of those combinations actually did reach a CPA target, and maybe not at the current spend level of, say, $100,000 like we said, but if we know at rollout we can invest $500,000 into a campaign, we should be measuring the campaign against the efficiencies we gain at that investment and not the lower end actual cost of our test campaign. And then back to our lawnmower example, right? Maybe March is not a good month for lawnmowers, and we ran our test campaign in March. So hopefully we have at least a small April-May campaign as well, just to validate that, hey, we did everything right and it just wasn't the right time. Have a 1, 2, 3 month test plan is always beneficial as well. I think you've got a good kind of case study that touches on some of that.
We do, yes. So in late 2018, Speedion was engaged by a client of ours, and they're in their startup in the subscription media space. And what they wanted to do was validate direct mail as a channel for acquisition. And so they saw in the market more established brands having a lot of success, and they felt like they could replicate similar growth results. Much of the questions that we spoke about earlier were asked during we have a consultative session where they asked things like, how long is this going to take us? What do we need to understand about the channel? What results should we expect? And so we, in conjunction with the client, developed a 4-phase approach that was going to look at 3 key metrics, if you will, which were, is this viable for acquisition? Do we get a good statistically significant read on it? Can we scale it to a reasonable CPA? So are we kind of in the ballpark of the CPA that we agreed upon? And then also, we wanted to test different creatives. So we actually did a postcard versus a letter pack and looked at which one performed better across the audiences. So we started with this 4-phase approach, and the first part was model development. So our client had already been in market for almost a full year with their product, and so they had acquired a substantial amount of customers via Facebook, digital display, and word of mouth type marketing. And so we took that data in and we modeled it. So what we do in that process is we take our consumer database of a couple hundred million consumers and the 1,000+ features available to each of them. We append that data on, and then we start to understand then, okay, so from that, we're then able to get a specific set of modeled features that make this prospect look like a best customer, make these customers really kind of resonate within the prospect universe. So we then took that model, applied it to the consumer database, and built the targeted universe. From that targeted universe, we then started to look at test design. So how much data do we want to put in the market? Do we want to take all of it from the top decile, which would be your highest propensity likelihood to convert into a customer? And then do we want to nth the 1 through 10 to create just a random audience? And the importance of that is it kind of continues to validate and optimize the cloning model as the data goes on. And so we did that as well. And we looked at developing creative. So how are we going to message these consumers? What's worked the best in the past? Let's replicate the success they've had on digital in the postcard, and then let's test getting even more copy within the letter pack. So really educating the consumer on why they need to think about this product and service, what is available to them, what differentiates this company from other media providers in that space. And so we used those two components to test and understand what the viability would be. From that, we put it in market. And so we worked on our end to develop the creative, get the test in the market while monitoring the in-home scans. As Matt mentioned earlier, it's a known impression. So you want to get as close to 100% in-home as possible. If you start to see over time that you don't have as much in-home, there could be a problem somewhere down the line that needs to be addressed. But after that, after about 5 to 6 weeks in market, you start the match back. And we looked at 3 different key areas on that. One was the address matchback. So we have a list of people, we mailed those people, they've converted. The second was a mobile phone matchback. So this particular client needs your mobile phone to download the product. And so we were able to reverse append phone numbers to the address file in order to understand the total volume of trial subscriptions and subsequent subscriber rates there. And then a trackable subscriber code also, if available. So they did have a subscriber promo code that would track the effectiveness of the direct mail campaign and the data, similar to a promo code on that. And so as it stands today, so from January 2019 to present, we're starting year 2 of the program. They started with a small test of 150,000 in-market pieces, and we're scaling over 1 million pieces a month now. So it has become a viable channel for them. And the CPA is trending as to where they want it. And most importantly, we're driving growth for the brand. So you can see some of the results. That 0.76 blended trial rate is across both the letter pack and the postcard. And from all the trialers, there's a specific time frame from trial to actual becoming a subscriber. And about 30% of all trialers ended up subscribing. So they noticed a very good increase in overall customer acquisition.
That's great. Do you want to maybe just give everybody a 10,000-foot view of Speedion and who we are?
Yeah, so Speedion is a data agency and services provider that helps marketers identify, attract, and retain their best customers. We do this through kind of two main competencies, which is campaign management and predictive analytics, as well as data-driven solutions across channels. So that's really the consumer data, enriching data, lookalike models, and managing campaigns for our clients in a turnkey fashion. So really looking at how we can help them realize the most efficiencies throughout the campaigns. And we leverage a 6-step framework when we consult or engage with our clients. So it's this discovery is, how do you define success? What are those metrics that we need to be aiming for in order to have a successful campaign? What is the strategy behind that is going to achieve those goals? So is it direct mail? Is it retargeting direct mail? Is it a direct mail and a digital? What is that strategy going to be? And then it's audience development, and that's really building the model, developing a targeted marketable universe for the campaign. And then as you get into it, it's campaign strategy. So that's developing the test campaign. How much volume are we going to put into market? How many different creative iterations are there going to be? How long do we want this campaign to run its course? And what are those key metrics, as we mentioned earlier, that we're going to benchmark ourselves upon? And there's deployment. And that's getting the direct mail in market. That's getting any supporting channels in market, and then measuring. So this is really the key part. Measuring is where we analyze all the results. We take those learnings into the next campaign. So over time, we can optimize the model, we can optimize creative, we can optimize what kind of data that we're bringing into market. And so these 6 phases kind of are circular in terms that they always repeat themselves. And so as we engage with our clients, we like to take this approach. And with that, Raquel, I'd like to turn it over to you for any Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you both so much. That was a great presentation. We will, as you just said, be moving over to the Q&A part of our webinar. So we did have some great questions come in so far. If audience, you have any other questions you'd like to pose, you can still paste them in the Q&A window, which you'll see in your Zoom panel. So let's go ahead and get started with our first one. Let's see. Okay, the first one that we have is Google just announced this week they're planning on phasing cookies out over the next 2 years. Does this affect direct mail at all?
You want to take this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think what it does is it supports direct mail as a more viable channel as marketers are getting more and more constrained by a lot of regulations, CCPA, and Google and Facebook having more walls around their garden, so to speak. It's going to be really important to use more offline data to help inform direct mail programs, especially because, and it's still too early to tell what's going to happen, but if it's anything like what happened with Facebook a few years ago, where they took the access of third-party data away inside of Facebook, you'll have to work with some third-party providers to help onboard that data. And so this gives you even more of an opportunity then to take this offline data, onboard it, and really truly get to a cross-channel coordinated marketing message.
And something we didn't touch on earlier too that kind of fits into that, direct mail is not an auction-based universe. Mark Zuckerberg does not control the price of a stamp. So having that kind of freedom and individuality from a platform or a service provider, online service provider that is consistent and reliable and set CPM is an advantage as well.
Excellent, thank you. The next question we have here is, what things do I absolutely have to know about direct mail to ensure I don't make any major mistakes?
I think number one is you're going to make mistakes.
I would say the thing that surprises folks the most ends up being right around creative due dates. And what you need to understand is your pieces are produced on a printing press. And that printing press is often booked and scheduled months and months in advance, and you have a window that you've basically rented for your pieces to be produced. And if you miss your window, you have to either hope that your printer has the flexibility to move some jobs around to get you back on, or for some reason no one is lined up after you, and you can take a couple days back. But schedules are there for a reason. Obviously, no one wants to miss an in-home date. I haven't seen it happen, luckily, but it is a real thing that can happen. And oftentimes, it's going to have significant cost implications if you don't stick to your original plan. So deadlines are there, schedules are there for a reason. Try to stick to them as close as possible.
Excellent, thank you so much. Our next question we have is it possible for a mail piece to be too personalized?
Yes.
So I think what's important about personalization within mail, and especially with regards to the creep factor, so to speak, is to be relevant mostly without giving away too much. And so Speedion has built a very strong practice within the life event space. Think movers, think new babies, newly engaged. And so it's really being able to use what you know about the life event or that personalization without getting too in the weeds or too in depth. And so we have one of our clients, they provide a variety of insurance products. And so all of these different life events at some way, shape, or form can be very important to the consumer. And so they just put them all on there and say, hey, life happens, talk to us about a homeowner's policy or life insurance or auto policy. So there's a variety of things that you can do. A lot of times with personalization, sometimes the best is just to, maybe keep it to name, maybe keep it to relevancy without giving too much and really just letting the data and the art kind of come together.
Yep, I'll echo that. Be relevant, don't be creepy.
Understood. Excellent. And we have this question which just came in. Can you give a successful example on the connection between direct mail and social media?
Sure. So we had, and this kind of will marry in personalization as well. So we have some clients that leverage us for mover campaigns, right? And so we're able to use mover data to help the personalization factor. And then we're able to use that to get direct mail out. And then so what we did though is the client had a few different benchmarks that they wanted to do. They wanted to not only increase customer acquisition, but they also wanted to drive foot traffic to stores as well as online brand awareness. So we leveraged not only the life event of moving, direct mail, but also email, digital, and social in conjunction with one another. And the way that we built the test program was that we had one audience get just email, one audience get direct mail and email, and then one audience that got direct mail, email, and digital. And what we found was the response lift from email was the lowest, direct mail and email was the second highest. I think it was about 14%. And then as we got to all the channels, we started to see an even higher increase in response. And so what's important, and I think in the eyes of myself and Matt, using social and digital channels as a brand awareness. I like to call it a digital billboard and leveraging the direct mail piece as the true conversion vehicle.
Excellent, thank you. And one more question that just came in. Can you give a few examples of good calls to action?
Yes. There needs to be a benefit to your prospect to engage with you, to visit your website. So that's where the call to action comes into play. What do I need to do to take advantage of what you're telling me? And whether that's visit our website, go to this specific URL, call this specific phone number, just, I don't want to say dumb it down, but just be very clear what you want them to do or what they need to do to take advantage of this offer. Here's a website, here's the app to download, here's a phone number to call. Don't make it hard to miss. Like we talked about earlier, offer is very important. So sometimes we'll have folks who, it might be a little bit against their brand guidelines to emphasize dollar off, percent off, so forth. But when it comes to response, that is, as we showed earlier, the second most important piece here. So don't be afraid to highlight that, even if it is a slight deviation from what you're portraying in TV or in other channels. Showcase that.
And to add to that too, I would say also for brands to leverage any learnings that they have on what works digitally, what works on their website, because you can at least start to use that as a way to test into it. Not saying that it's going to work 100% all the time, but if you have specific offers that you have on your website through Facebook, you can replicate a lot of that within the direct mail channel as well, and then start to do what we call a champion versus challenger, where after each iteration of a campaign, you start to take out which one loses between the two, and then you start to really understand how the call to action and the creative really interacts with one another.
Excellent, thank you both. We do have a few more minutes here, and as we wrap up, if anyone wants to send over any last minute questions, please feel free to. In the meantime, I'd love to thank you both again for your time today, as well as our audience for joining us here today. If you want to hear a little bit more about this topic and learn more about Momentum's live events, feel free to contact me directly at Raquel@momentumevents.com, or you can visit us online at momentumevents.com as well. With that, I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Matt and Anthony to give final farewells.
Yes, Raquel, thank you very much for hosting us today. Greatly appreciate that. And to everyone that joined the webinar, I hope this was a good use of your time. And we're happy to be a resource for you guys if you guys want to reach out directly to us. I think we're going to have a email link with access to the webinar once that gets recorded and available for download. I believe it's marketing@speedyondata.com, and we'll probably follow up with any additional information for that.
Yep, I'd like to kind of echo Anthony there, and also thank the other folks here at Speedyon that were involved in this, helping us build this presentation, make it look as nice as it looks today. The back and forth with momentum, getting all of this set up. So thank you to everyone. Thank you for your time, and thank you, Raquel, for moderating.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, everyone. We wish you a great day.
Bye.